Greetings to you from the Church of South India, with a church membership of 5,015,000 congregations. The Church of South India has had a Department of Ecological Concerns for over 20 years. We have learned a lot and shared a lot with the church in India and the world church. But this concern was born out of the serious challenges our society faced and continues to face from environmental degradation and climate change. Irregular and extreme rainfall is causing havoc to our farmers. These men and women are poor people, tenant farmers, and there has been a shocking incidence of farmers being driven to suicide because of debt and despair caused by crop failures. In the streets of my diocese, the Coimbatore diocese, I see farmers forced off their land because of climate change. While CSI, with a church membership of 5 million, continues to grow in its mission and ministry, it also faces serious challenges that disturbs the life of the church and the society, particularly on our use of non-renewable resources. Carbon emissions are high, our cities are polluted towards global warming and leads to climate change. As a result, we get insufficient rains that are also irregular, that has affected our farmers acutely. Drinking water is slowly becoming scarce. Circa 20% of world people are responsible for 80% of emissions. The Church of South India does not invest on fossil fuels. It commits to help through actions in our own lives, pressure on governments, the state government and the central governments in India, and the large industries, and to stand in solidarity with the most affected. Church of South India provides the parishes, the pastorates, with resources designed to provide awareness on the issues. In our part of the world, nature has become the new poor. There is a Greek word that says, if you want to know about water, do not ask the fish. We appeal, please change development paradigm or development model and lifestyle. Rich countries to compensate damage caused. Developed countries to help in technology knowledge. Disinvest on fossil fuel. If we do not act now or begin to act now, we are to face consequences that we are in India now facing. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that contribution. Thank you so much. I do remember when I was studying at New College, a colleague of yours from South India, who's been a commissioner here, Soman Das, gave a series of lectures back in the early 80s talking about climate change. It was very prophetic at that time, and one of the things he said to us was, we say in South India, lead us not into imitation. The world's carrying capacity for highly developed global economies like ours is simply not there, and I think we need to develop a very robust theology of sufficiency. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Yvonne Grant.
I'm on here. I'm on there. Moderator, Yvonne Grant, 519.
Thank you.
We, as a church, are trying to be environmentally friendly. But we're finding that the costs to buy these products, such as cups, plates, etc., are far more excessive than what the normal throwaway eating things are. And even with your common tea bag, such as Tetley, it has plastic in it. PG Tips, excuse the branding, are also making disposable tea bags, but they are £25 more expensive than what the normal common tea bag is. So how can we as a church provide refreshments on an economical and biodegradable thing when it is so expensive to buy them in the first place? We need to have a compromise, and I realise that while the compromise is expensive, we cannot keep throwing away this rubbish. But we need to make sure that the manufacturers who are producing these products for us to buy know that they in turn are harming our nature and its reserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move to number 4? Accepted? Yep, agreed. 5. Then we come to number 6, which has, we'll use 6 on as in writing, and then we have 2 counter motions. There we have a Mr. John Boyle wanting to speak just now.
Moderator.
Oh, sorry.
280, John Boyle. My problem is I don't know what the Paris climate alignment as far as a business plan is concerned, but I'm concerned that in certain parts of Scotland, a reduction in the investment in these fuels will have a downturn to the people. Aberdeenshire is the area I would highlight, who work and are employed producing the oil which we use. We also, in my own congregation, use gas to heat the building. If there isn't continued investment to produce gas, I trust my minister will explain in the middle of December, I'm the fabric convener, not me, that there is no heating in the building. And I think there is a number of congregations in a similar vein. We need to continue in some form to continue to invest in these fuels unless we decide that we can have other means of using them. We all have our house heated, most of us by gas, and a car sitting at my door, maybe in a few years it will be electric, but currently it has petrol in the tank. So I just urge caution when we try to say that the church is going to stop investing in something which I think currently the church still currently uses to a great extent. Moderator.
Can we take the motion and the 2 counter motions first before we hear any more discussion, and then we can make sense of things? So the first counter motion is in the name of Jennifer Adams.
600, Jenny Adams. Moderator, today I'm proposing a counter motion to section 6, suggesting that the original deliverance contains nearly all the right words, just not necessarily in the right order. What I'm proposing reads, urge that since the business plans of oil and gas companies are not aligned with the Paris Climate Agreement, the Investors' Trust and pension trustees withdraw from investing in them within 2 years. I think many of the arguments I could make are contained in the report of the Church and Society Council, but I seek greater urgency of action. The time to act decisively is now, to remove our investments from oil and gas companies and reinvest in renewable energy and clean technology. The time is now partly because in 2016 this General Assembly instructed the Council, in partnership with Investors' Trust and pension trustees, to engage with oil and gas companies in which the Church has significant holdings to establish their commitment to meeting the UN climate change targets and to report back to the General Assembly of 2018. Those 2 years of engagement have now passed. This year's report makes it clear in sections 7.6.3 and 7.6.4 that the business models of oil and gas companies are showing no sign of change. Oil production and exploration is being increased, and shareholder engagement is often resisted. On Monday this week, BP held their AGM, and their CEO was celebrating the improvement to their core business evidenced by increased production in 2017. He also stated that they have no plans to set emissions targets. Yesterday at Shell's AGM, a shareholder resolution was tabled urging the company to have specific, tougher emissions targets in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. Shell's board opposed that resolution and only 5.5% of shareholders voted in favour. Engagement is not working where the core business is based on fossil fuel extraction and use. The 2016 Assembly report recommended time-limited engagement with evidence needed of effective and convincing response within 2 years. That time is up. Therefore, we must recognise the moral imperative to withdraw these particular investments, directing future engagement energy where other companies are likely and willing to change. Such disinvestment might have financial consequences, but as the report notes in 7.8.1, past performance of fossil fuel companies was not necessarily better than alternatives. There are in fact great financial risks from remaining invested in companies whose businesses will be adversely affected by essential climate change policy and regulation, when reserves may become stranded assets that cannot be extracted and used. Helena Morrissey, head of personal investing at Legal and General Asset Management, has warned that we sleepwalked into the financial crisis and we have no excuse for sleepwalking into a climate crisis. But even if there was a financial cost to us, to work within our charitable purposes, we are obliged to avoid investments that cause so much harm. We lobby governments to have ambitious climate policies. We share the stories of our sisters and brothers affected by the changing climate. We support a climate change project in Eco-Congregation Scotland. How can we also support the extraction of fossil fuels? I welcome the previous sections of deliverance that will aid investment decisions in the future, but we need to act now on what we know now. As today's report spells out, we have a theological imperative to care for creation, and creation needs a rapid transition to a net zero carbon economy. We need to leave the majority of fossil fuels in the ground while transitioning economies dependent on the oil industry to use the considerable skills in alternative ways. From my own parish in Murray, I can tell you that less welcome transitions have already been forced on folk through redundancy from the oil industry in recent years. Moderator, the world is watching us today. Disinvesting now would be the right thing to do even if no one was watching, because where our treasure is indicates something about our heart. But people are watching, including those already most affected in our overheating world. We must act now, not wait another 2 years, while our sisters, brothers and the rest of creation cry out. I move the amendment in my name.
Thank you. Is the amendment seconded? Thank you. We're going to hear the other counter motion, which is in the name of Albert Bogle.
Albert Bogle, 387. I want to speak to this not because I'm in disagreement with the aspiration of what we want to happen, but it seems to me that if we go down the road of disinvestment, we negate the opportunity to continue engagement. And I think engagement's important. So part of this is the reason why I'm bringing this forward, is I think we'll get a headline for disinvestment, definitely. But what will happen after that? But if we could continue to be investors and be involved in investment, we can begin to influence and continue to try and influence the way things go. So I'm someone who admires the work. I'm someone that wants this to happen. I'm someone that travels the world and has seen all that's happening in the Amazon and the problems with all this. It's not that I'm against it, but I'm trying to be practical. I'm trying to say we need to be honest about how we conduct ourselves. And if we say 2 years of disinvestment in this particular area, then we have to start thinking, how are we going to live? Every time I put petrol or diesel in my car, I'm investing because I'm using the service. And so there can become a whole kind of hypocritical view in this. And I know that none of us want to be there. So it seems to me as though it's a great aspiration and it's a lofty thing to think about. And it's not that the oil companies are great people. But can I tell you, there are some great people in the oil companies, and there are some people in the oil companies that are keen to begin to think about renewals, and many of the oil companies are putting lots of money into the whole area of renewal. So it's not an easy thing, and it's not just everyone's bad in one side and everyone's good in the other side. It seems to me as though I'm pleading for practicality, I'm pleading for more to be accomplished through engagement, I'm pleading for our view would go out to the world and to Scotland for those who are working in the oil industry to make them feel as though in some way they are unethical because that's the way they've been earning their living. Now, I know none of us want to go down that road of pointing the finger at people. We want the same things. But what I'm pleading for is perhaps more engagement and perhaps more robust engagement to make all this happen. So that's the reason why I brought this. It's not that in any way I want to be in opposition to the good work that Richard and his team are doing, moderator, because I really do respect them and have great admiration for all that Martin does and his whole group. And in fact, I'm amazed that they can't make some engagement because I've never met a negotiator quite as good as Martin. And I think maybe you've just had the wrong people doing it. But if we could get Martin involved in this, I think we could make a huge difference. So engagement would be the area I'm saying, let's go further. Let's stick in there. Let's be the thorn in the flesh in the oil companies. Because let's say we want to be heard. And even if it's only 5% that's listening, continue to make it happen. Because at the end of the day, very few of us are going to stop investing, putting our petrol or our diesel in our tanks. So that's where I'm at, and I think it's a sensible position I'm taking. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this counter-motion seconded? Thank you. The clerk is going to explain procedure now, for me.
Well, moderator, we have a motion in the name of the council, which is the thing in the blue book. We have two counter motions, one in the name of Jenny Adams and one in the name of Albert Bogle. This is a time when we will have discussion of the three motions that are before us, and commissioners are invited, I presume, at this stage to speak and commend one of the three and make points about them. When discussion is complete, we also, of course, could have questions along the way if that's appropriate. But once the discussion is complete, we would have an electronic vote. And the motion would be number 1 in counter motion by Jenny, 2, counter motion by Albert, 3. And the vote would be taken. If one of the motions before us gains 50% or more, then it carries. If no motion gains 50%, then the motion attracting the least support falls, and we vote again between the two that are left, and we see then what's standing.
I'm assuming that in there, after the discussion, each Jenny, Albert and Richard get to reply.
Indeed.
Okay.
Jenny and Albert will get to speak, and then the convener will get to sum up at the end.
Thank you. I'm clear, are you? Open to questions just now and discussion. I have Alan Yates.
Moderator. First of all, Alan Yates, number 716. I am the moderator for General Assembly of the United Reformed Church, and can I thank you for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to join you all here. Thank you very much. I wanted to add to this debate to give you some guidance of what the United Reformed Church do. We have a policy of positive engagement, which means today we have a small amount of money, which is about 6% of our investment, in two oil and gas companies, Shell and Chevron. We do not invest in any company that has coal extraction or oil from tar sands. But we do believe in this positive engagement. For two principal reasons. The first is, if we do not engage, then these companies are surrounded by voices that have little or no concern for climate change. And I think it's important that they do hear our Christian and Christ-like voices. The second thing is, if we invest not just a single share so we can go to their general meeting, but sufficient so that we get an audience with the board and the chief executive, which we do. We also come to that meeting with a view that we are not going to change the world in one meeting. So we have a list of steps that we want the companies to take. We, for instance, have done that with Exxon and got absolutely nowhere with Exxon, so we dropped and we disinvested from Exxon. Chevron, we are close to disinvesting because we feel they're not listening particularly well. Shell, we feel, are listening. Now, in the interests of kissing, I will only give you one example, but we have quite a long list of examples where we believe Shell have listened. This is quite an important one because most oil companies value oil that has not yet been taken out of the ground, the reserves, I think it's called. They also incentivize their board on the ratio of reserves to production. Shell is now changing that because of the intervention of a group of investors, and we belong to a group of investors, ethical investors that are investing in Shell. And in reducing their reliance on the asset, so-called asset of reserves, it means in the future they will not be as captured by stranded assets as others, giving them the flexibility to move into other forms of more climate-friendly processes. Thank you.
So, thank you. James Bissett.
Moderator James Bissett, 637. I have the pleasure of saying my church is solar powered. Conton, actually Lochluchart Church, part of the parish of Conton, the Lochluchart, has solar panels in the garden. We are already solar powered. Last week, I drove a electric car. I drove a Nissan Leaf. And when we get better travel expenses for OLMs, that'll be the next thing in my driveway. I'm already taking steps to electrify and divest, so I must speak in favour of Jennifer's motion. Market forces are already swinging in favour of renewable energy. Even in the United States, it's my understanding that even though the President is pushing for coal and jobs for coal, renewable energy is taking off massively there, and the same in China. And even in my own parish, you might like them, you might loathe them, I think they're pretty, but we have wind farms. Scotland is leading the way in renewable generation. And my friend who's standing at the microphone here, I believe you're going to say something about divestment. I had the great pleasure of being at Dalgety Parish Church with Tara and Hannah, and they felt resistance to divestment. But I think this is something that we should encourage. Market forces are going to do it whether we are there or not. So I think it is time for us to take the lead and get our money out. Thank you very much, Moderator.
Sally Foster-Fulton. That's it. You're on.
All right. Foster-Fulton 247. I welcome this robust debate. I think it's probably one of the most important debates we could have on the floor of the General Assembly. And as we heard earlier, not only is the world watching, but our sisters and brothers across the planet are waiting. And I think they've waited long enough. Whenever you talk about investment, you talk about cost, the investment, the return. So I want to talk a little bit about the cost to our sisters and brothers. One person every second is displaced by weather and climate-related disasters. That's 26 million people every year. Melting glaciers in Bolivia are eroding cities, landslides, causing flood and drought. 2 years ago, the drought in Malawi made 8 million people extremely food, and secure. And this church and other churches in Scotland responded to that. The hurricane in Haiti destroyed homes and lives. And those are just tiny examples of what's happening across our planet. I also want to mention investment because it's really important. Our partners across the globe are investing in the future that they want to see, and it's inspirational. Our office in Malawi is entirely solar powered. And not only are they solar powered, but it's a lot more consistent. The Christian Aid office, I work for Christian Aid. I'm speaking as myself, but I'm informed by our sisters and brothers and what's happening across the world. That solar powered office is much more consistent than other offices nearby. In Ethiopia and Burkina Faso and Honduras, women's empowerment groups are opening solar shops. And so again, offering electricity, offering irrigation, offering solar charging points for phones, they are leapfrogging our dirty footprints in the face of that cost. Sadly, they're having to use those solar-powered chargers to use text messaging to inform people when the floods are happening so that they can get out and move away quickly enough. So they're actually having to use the technology that they're using to help themselves. I also want to talk about return, because we want to know what our return on this investment would be. We keep talking about the children who are going to inherit the planet. I would flip that on its head and say that we are giving back the planet we've borrowed. And my grandmother always said, give something back in better shape, or at least in as good a shape as you got it. And we are not doing that. Not only that, but right now, across the planet, sisters and brothers are struggling, and the drivers of climate change sit here in this room. I absolutely believe in engagement, but you don't have to invest your money to engage with those companies. By disinvesting, you are sending a very strong message about the kind of future you're going to invest in. You speak with a different voice. So I would urge the General Assembly to think hard about what you hear from your global sisters and brothers, about the kind of future you want to see and the kind of present you want to invest in. The world is absolutely watching. I think they've waited long enough.
Michael Goss.
Thank you, Moderator. Goss 526. I want to speak in support of Jenny Adams. It's good to have a voice to be heard. We don't have a big enough voice on the boards of these great companies. Money talks. That's the louder voice. Walking here in the mornings, I'm conscious of all the diesel fumes that I'm getting as I get up the hill on the way to the mound. In Carnoustie, we don't get that because the buses are electric powered. The technology is already there. We've got our new electric car. I know that others from right across the theological divide in our church have started to buy electric cars. They're not expensive Teslas. They're cheap wee Chloe-type vehicles and so on. And they work. And they do 150 miles comfortably with the heating on. We can make the change. We can do it in our own small ways, and we can do it in the bigger ways with where we put our money. Money talks. That's the voice we need to speak. Please support Mrs. Adams' counter-motion. Thank you.
Mary Sweetland.
Sweetland, 367. Last month at the Eco Congregation Scotland annual gathering, which was titled Pass the Planet, a young member of Bearsden Cross congregation, who also happens to be the West of Scotland Green MSP, Ross Greer, implored the baby boom generation, who are mostly sitting here, to do something now to tackle the climate crisis. We have before us in Jenny's motion a chance an opportunity to do that today. I heard the other night of a local university who took the decision to divest. And as soon as they made that decision, the directors of Shell made their way up to Edinburgh to have a discussion. I think that will have more impact than us continuing to keep whatever money we have with Shell and BP in their coffers at the moment. We can act now and have our own David Attenborough moment. Look at the impact he has had on reducing single-use plastic. Can the Church of Scotland take that opportunity today? I support Jenny's motion.
Nigel Parker.
Nigel Parker, 543. Moderator, when you pass from the mound through into the courtyard, you will pass Aberdeen Presbytery's banner. The signature image is not a burning bush, but a burning flare stack. I'm a minister in Aberdeen. My manse lies under the flight path of the helicopters from the busiest civilian heliport in the world. BP has its North Sea headquarters at the north end of this parish. I stand to speak in favour of the counter-motion in the name of Albert Bogle. Not because I want to avoid supporting some of the arguments that have already been presented in the favour of Jennifer Adams, but because I think it's more realistic, more grounded, and more authentic. This is not some faceless capitalist industry in Texas, but the livelihood of my and many other communities in the Northeast. I oppose this. I bring the counter-motion not because I'm beating the drum for unrestrained capitalism, but believing that Albert Bogle's motion offers a better way forward. I have, as others do in the Northeast, members of my session who have worked for 20, 30, 40 years and are proud to have worked in an industry that literally fuels our way of life and literally lubricates our economy, not the least of which is the NHS, which the convener has already referred to in his report. By asking for a radical divestment, it's suggested that this will attention. But moderator, what if we're going to divest our money, then the implication must also be that we must divest our members. And this Jennifer Adams counter-motion suggests that divesting our money means that the oil and gas industry is on the same level as apartheid South African oranges. I'm not prepared to do that, moderator. But I do think there are things that the oil and gas industry need to hear. This is a business that does good in our communities, and I'm sure that there are many who could repay. For example, when I, as a parish minister, visit my folks in Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, I know I can get a free parking space within 150 metres of the front door of the hospital because of a multi-million-pound donation from someone who made his fortune in oil and gas and wanted to give it back. Are we going to be so ungrateful as to be challenged about this? So this meant the donation built a multi-storey car park that our health board could never afford. I think of another person connected to my congregation who is in an oil-related industry, who's so worried at the weakness of the teaching of STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, that he is offering his company's resources and offering to pay for it in order to encourage education in our local primary and secondary schools. Thirdly, moderator, we may feel that oil is the root of all kinds of trouble, and there's a lot that oil has to answer for. But it may be that the best opportunity to get out of where we're at is to use the skills and the technology in the oil and gas industry already to apply those renewable technologies that we've already heard mention of already. There are oil companies who are repositioning themselves as energy companies, even changing their names to do so. Now, it may be that some people think, that's just window dressing, that just looks awfully good up there, but that's neither the way of it. But it's doing good, and we're moving, and we want to be encouraging in that direction. And fourthly, moderator, perhaps most importantly, that this is an industry that has an ear for the church. When I had the privilege of being the moderator of Aberdeen Presbytery, I led the service that introduced the then oil and gas industry chaplain, not the present one, the previous one. And in that service, it was full of people with responsibility and authority in the oil and gas industry in the northeast of Scotland, who were pleased and encouraged to affirm what the church was doing. That was the week when the oil and gas industry taxation regime was changing. I spoke about a shiver going down the spine of the industry. And we've had thousands of redundancies in the oil industry that haven't made the headlines in the way that some other has. I suggested the chief concern at that time was with the care and concern of managers, not for the effect on shareholders, but on those who would be losing their jobs. Thousands of redundancy. This is an industry that's taken a big hit and deserves our continuing engagement and our loving correction. We have an oil and gas industry chaplain, in part funded, moderator. Moderator, if we divest from the oil and gas industry, could it be, and I hope I'm not putting ideas in people's head, the oil and gas industry might decide to divest from us? I support Mr. Bogle's counter-motion.
Robin Hill.
Moderator Robin Hill, number 78. Jenny has very helpfully used the term theological imperative here, and that's something we need to hold on to. It being the case that there is certainly a theological imperative for us to consider. Is there a reason? It may be a practical reason, it may be a legal reason, an organisational reason, but is there a reason why the General Assembly is not being asked to instruct? We're being asked to urge, and that goes for Jenny's counter-motion and it goes for section 6 as well. So I would like to know if there is a reason why we're not seeking to instruct, or put another way, if we do urge, what do we think is going to happen?
Principal Clark, I think that was a question for you.
Well, I think it's a question for the lawyers.
For the lawyers. Better still. If we keep passing it along the table, it will fall off the end.
Well, moderator, we would take our lead from the council, which has itself used the verb urge, but we speculate that that might be because they take into account the need of the pension trustees to reach their own decision and not have their discretion fettered. I'm speculating.
Moderator, the Procurator's speculation is right. Our understanding is that the pension trustees, the Church of Scotland Investor Trust, are kind of independent charities, and we cannot instruct another charity to do something. We can only urge them. What we've done is we've worked very closely with the Church of Scotland Investors Trust and the pension trustees in this report, and I think that they've given an indication that whatever the mind of the General Assembly is, they will attempt to honour it, but we can't instruct.
Thank you. Shona Knox.
Shona Knox, 819. Moderator, I would like to speak to Jennifer Adams' counter-motion as a youth delegate from the National Youth Assembly, especially as I was a delegate at our 2015 Youth Assembly where we debated climate justice. At NYA that year, to help inform our debate, we held a panel-style Q&A session which included lawyer John Sturrock, Tom Ballantyne from Stop Climate Chaos Scotland, John Cape from iPower, Valerie Brown from Christian Aid Scotland, Sally Foster-Fulton, who was the convener of the Church and Society Council at the time, and Callum Scott, an exploration geoscientist who was also a delegate that year. This was a lively debate that provided space for the National Youth Assembly to learn more about climate justice issues, with a particular focus on the question, do you think the Church of Scotland should divest from fossil fuels? A quote in the NYA 2015 supplementary report from a delegate, which you can find online on the Church of Scotland website, reads, I know it's quite tricky for us to talk about, but on a moral level, climate change is the biggest challenge mankind has ever faced. We as a church need to decide if it's morally acceptable for us to be partly responsible. More people will die every single year. We need to decide if we are morally comfortable being in that position. We're not just going to end everything to do with fossil fuels. The divestment from fossil fuels frees us money for us to invest in renewables. We need a transition. If we take that money out of these industries that are crashing now, where people are losing jobs, we are creating a much more secure investment for the church for decades to come. The Youth Assembly then took a vote on whether we felt the church should divest from fossil fuels, and the results were as follows. 35% voted for full divestment, 37% for partial divestment, 10% for no divestment, and 18% abstained. Almost 3/4 of the Youth Assembly that year voted for divestment, whether full or partial. Considering this week, we have spoke about being radical, being brave and bold, and making decisions rather than delaying them for future General Assemblies. And with that view, I'd like to emphasise that the National Youth Assembly debated this very topic 3 years ago. The deliverance as it stands in the Blue Book would delay action on this by another potential 2 years, whereas the counter motion invites action now to protect God's planet, which I urge Commissioners to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. It's now 11 o'clock and technically the circulation break, actually not technically, we're suggesting that there is still a circulation break. Those of you who have cards in the machines, please can you leave them there? And then that way we can make sure that we keep up with those who have still got contributions to make. There are 9 contributions on here. Mr. Macchiato. You're not on yet, Claiborne.
Oh, sorry.
Now.
690. Just one question on floor. If we cannot instruct another charity, why are still? I am quite in favor of Janie's motion, but if we cannot instruct another charity, we cannot keep with the motion. Can we?
Well, the motion urges. It's deliberately framed as urging. And the reason we set up trust bodies in a way is to preserve some of their independence. We appoint the trustees to these bodies and we hear their report and what they do, and we can urge them to do certain things. But the fact that they are trust bodies, they are that for a reason. Because they have another set of interests and responsibilities. So we have trusts that run these things for us. This motion and the other motions urge them to take certain steps, and that is the correct way of moving ahead.
But one of them doesn't say instruct?
No.
Both,
Albert says instruct. The council, not...
Instructs the council to engage with the oil companies.
That's different.
Okay.
Okay,
sorry.
thank you, Claire.
So if we take the circuit bit, I want to say a quick word about the postcard. Do you want to say any more, Richard?
Just, Moderator, just spend these minutes that we've got talking amongst yourselves with each other and filling in one of these cards. It would be a very helpful thing for people to do.
Are they to leave the cards anywhere?
Yeah, leave the...
Sorry, yes, there's a bucket, or 2 buckets actually, on the steps. So if once you've written your card, 2 of the council members will be standing with buckets with sunflowers on them.
So this session is suspended for 30 minutes, it looks like.